is tearing itself apart. But the storm cannot drown out the inevitable. You are small, so terribly small, pressed into the cold, rotting veins of the earth. Look at the mud beneath your claws. Watch the water collect. See it tremble, a ripple, then a wave. The ground groans under a weight the earth was not meant to hold. The rain above you stops, eclipsed by a shadow that devours the storm. A low, wet exhale forces heavy mist through the cracks of the wood. It is smelling the damp soil. It is smelling the fear clinging to your scales. Close your eyes. Do not shiver. Do not breathe. This is the drowned psychic grove of the late Maastrichtian. A world submerged in a suffocating, unrelenting monsoon. The bruised, storm-blue heavens have fractured, unleashing a torrential deluge that violently batters the broad, waxy fronds of the ancient canopy. High above, the rain is a chaotic, deafening roar, a relentless aerial percussion that strips away the dying foliage and sends it plummeting into the abyssal black of the forest floor. Down here, in the micro-realm, the earth is actively dissolving. The ground is no longer solid rock or packed dirt. It is a treacherous, sticky slurry of sickly brown mud, saturated ash, and decaying organic matter. You are trapped within a cage of pale, bone-white roots, the skeletal remains of a massive cycad tree that succumbed to a storm decades ago. This hollowed-out subterranean pocket is a temporary tomb painted in damp fern green and suffocating amber shadows. The air in this microscopic cavern is thick, almost unbreathable, heavy with the metallic tang of atmospheric ozone and the sweet, nauseating stench of botanical rot. Water bleeds through the fibrous ceiling in heavy macro droplets, landing with rhythmic, echoing splashes that sound like the ticking of a primeval clock against your trembling snout. Giant, armored insects displaced by the rising floodwaters scramble blindly over the slimy, waterlogged bark, their chitinous legs scraping frantically against the wood, oblivious to the far greater terror that is rapidly approaching. You are an Edmontosaurus hatchling, a creature merely days out of the shell. You're a fragile, pathetic assembly of soft cartilage, trembling muscle, and sheer, unfiltered instinct. And right now, every biological imperative is screaming at you to fuse with the shadows, to become indistinguishable from the rotting wood. The forest around you is vast, fiercely uncaring, and entirely hostile to your microscopic existence. There is no true sanctuary in this primeval world, only temporary hiding places that merely delay the inevitable jaws of the food chain. The struggle within the root is not one of kinetic movement, but of agonizing, claustrophobic paralysis. Every muscle fiber in your tiny body is locked in a desperate battle against your own autonomic nervous system. The cold rain seeping into your shallow burrow strips away your core body heat, forcing a violent, erratic clicking of your soft jaws as you begin to shiver. You fight to clamp them shut, grinding your toothless gums together. You fight to slow the frantic, muffled thudding of your own racing heartbeat, a sound that feels deafeningly loud in the tight acoustic confines of the decaying root. But The true terror is not the biting cold, nor the muddy water rapidly rising around your delicate ankles. It is the rhythmic, sub-bass vibration rolling through the earth like a localized earthquake. It begins as a heavy, uncomfortable feeling in your fragile sternum, a deep, bowel-shaking infrasound drone that rises in frequency precisely as the muddy water in the tiny puddle before you begins to violently ripple. Boom. A paralyzing pause filled only by the chaotic roar of the falling rain. Boom. The earth is behaving like a liquid trampoline. A 9-ton bipedal apex predator is navigating the psychic grove. You cannot see it. You do not need to. The sheer physics of its colossal existence actively rewrite the environment around you. With every deliberate footfall, the water table violently shifts. The sickly mud-brown water surges up through the microscopic cracks in the psychic roots, flooding your cramped sanctuary with frigid slurry. The dominant sound overriding the raging storm is the massive wet squelch and the terrifying vacuum-like suction of immense flesh and deep mud violently separating. It is the acoustic shadow of a tyrant. The predator is moving with a slow, deliberate lethality. It does not crash blindly through the dense forest. It stalks, feeling the terrain, sensing the micro-movements of the delicate ecosystem beneath its devastating toes. The pale bone-white roots of your psychic cage begin to groan in agony. The ancient wood protesting as the soft, saturated mud around it is compressed by an unimaginable, crushing mass. The thick root, as wide as a fallen tree trunk, suddenly buckles under the pressure with a violent, bone-crushing snap that echoes like a rifle shot within your tiny chamber. The resulting seismic vibration throws your fragile body against the wet earth. The monster is directly above you. The rain above your burrow suddenly ceases. The bruised storm blue light bleeding weakly through the upper canopy is abruptly extinguished, plunging your microscopic world into absolute, abyss black darkness. The shadow has eclipsed the storm. The tyrant has paused right over your head. You are pinned beneath the soul of an earth-shattering biological god. A 3-toed, heavily scaled foot wider than your entire known world sinks deep into the slurry overhead, pressing the psychic root structure violently downward, shrinking your already claustrophobic doom by terrifying inches. The dead wood screams under the apocalyptic pressure. Wet dirt and decaying bark rain down upon your trembling back, coating your scales in the detritus of the forest floor. And then, the true horror descends from the canopy. The massive, heavily scarred head lowers, it bypasses the upper branches, plunging down into the damp fern-green undergrowth with the slow, terrifying grace of a leviathan. The predator is surging, not with its eyes, but with a highly evolved olfactory system that can read the chemical signature of a single drop of blood diluted in a flooded river. A massive snout, slick with torrential rain and thick mud, blindly probes the jagged, splintered entrance of the psychic root. It entirely blocks out what little remains of the outside world. An overwhelming rush of hot, humid air suddenly floods your microscopic space, a violent blast of misty saliva, decaying meat, and the metallic scent of old blood. It is a low, wet exhale that forces the heavy, suffocating mist through the cracks of the wood, clouding the scene completely in an impenetrable fog. And then, the inhale, the sheer biological vacuum of the beast's breath physically pulls the ambient air from your tiny lungs. Its enormous, heavily scaled nostrils flare wide, drawing in the heavy, damp atmosphere of the grove. Inside its cavernous skull, millions of hypersensitive olfactory receptors are dissecting the breeze. It is smelling the crushed ferns. It is smelling the stagnant, sickly mud. And it is smelling the terrified, hyperventilating chemical markers clinging desperately to your wet scales. The unmistakable scent of fear. You are mere inches away from a cavernous maw lined with serrated rail spikes. You can hear the deep, wet, rhythmic rattle of its massive lungs drawing breath. The immense, blurred, golden eye might be visible just outside the narrow opening, staring blindly into the darkness, calculating, processing the sensory data. The predator knows something is here. The ecosystem itself is whispering your location to the butcher. Do not shiver. Do not breathe. If your fragile heart beats one fraction too loud, the ancient wood above you will be ripped away like brittle paper, exposing you to the storm and the teeth. The silence between you and the predator is heavier, infinitely more oppressive than the falling rain. It is a terrifying standoff between the infinitely massive and the infinitesimally small. A biological staring contest in the pitch black of the Cretaceous mud.
For an eternity trapped in suffocating amber, the standoff holds the monsters wet. Breaths continue to wash over your trembling form. Each exhalation a blast of terrifying heat. Each inhalation a suffocating vacuum that threatens to drag you into the light. But then, a subtle imperceptible shift in the wind occurs. A stronger, more promising scent is carried on the monsoon gale. The rotting carcass of a massive hadrosaur miles away, perhaps. Or the territorial musk of a rival encroaching on its hunting grounds. The tyrant's hyper-focused attention fractures. The massive scarred snout slowly withdraws from the burrow's entrance, dragging a thick, viscous string of saliva that catches and hangs heavily on the jagged splinters of the bone-white root. The heavy, suffocating heat dissipates instantly, violently replaced by the biting, unforgiving cold of the monsoon storm. Above you, the immense crushing weight begins to shift. The ground groans one final agonizing time. The massive leg lifts, the dominant sound returns to the grove. The terrifying squelch, the deep, resonant suction of a titanic three-toed footprint pulling free from the sticky, resisting slurry. The heavy mud footprint left behind instantly begins to fill with rushing rainwater, mirroring the bruised, chaotic sky above. The footsteps resume their slow, thunderous rhythm. Boom, squelch, boom, squelch. Each impact is marginally less violent than the last. The deep, bow-shaking infrasound drone slowly drops in frequency, fading back into the chaotic, deafening roar of the heavy rain impacting the broad, broadleaf canopy. The water in your tiny mud puddle ceases its violent, chaotic rippling. It returns to a calm, shivering surface disturbed only by the rhythming, agonizingly slow dripping from the roof of your wooden tomb. You remain curled in a tight, pathetic ball, pressed hard into the mud, refusing to move a single muscle. The adrenaline that has been coursing through your tiny veins leaves you utterly exhausted, paralyzed by the residual, lingering dread. The sanctuary is silent once more, save for the eternal uncaring storm. The overwhelming presence of the monster is now felt entirely through its sheer, terrifying absence.
You have survived. But in the primeval, blood-soaked world of the late Maastrichtian, survival is never a true victory. It is merely a temporary biological delay. There is no triumph to be found here. No heroic conquest over the insurmountable forces of nature. The ecosystem does not care for your microscopic struggle. The predator that nearly ended your life bore you no specific malice. He was simply a potential, insignificant calorie, mathematically weighed against the physical effort of unearthing you, and ultimately discarded for a more efficient, substantial meal. This is the ruthless, unfeeling truth of the Cretaceous world. You live not because you were strong or fast or particularly clever. You live purely because you were small enough to be overlooked, insignificant enough to blend seamlessly into the rotting, decaying veins of the earth. Tomorrow, the deep mud will dry. The blinding sun will eventually pierce the thick canopy, and the eternal hunt will begin all over again. You will either grow into a titan yourself, or you will perish, ground down into the exact same sticky slurry that forms your current sanctuary. For now, you huddle in the abyssal blackness of the root, listening to the unending rain, a microscopic, trembling ghost hidden within a forest of walking titans.